What's up, everybody, and welcome to another weekly meta breakdown, this time for January 6th. So we're going to be taking a look at the 3rd, 4th, and 5th, so this past weekend's results, and see exactly what's happening in the meta, what are people doing, and do we have a massive weekend for you. So if you don't know, if you're living under a rock, you're not following what's going on in the tournament world in Magic the Gathering, we had the SCG Atlanta, so Star City Games Atlanta happened this past weekend, and they had a bunch of events. And the place to have the second most events this past weekend was Japan. So we love looking at Japan results because Japan is a very strong region, and they're always kind of like one step or two steps ahead of what's going on in the US. I always like kind of seeing what's going on with their meta shifts. So we have a long list of tournaments to get through. If this is your first time, what are you going to see in this video? So what we like to do is take a look at the past weekend's results. We take a look at usually the top 3, sometimes top 4 of each of the tournaments. We'll look at each of the decks and see what's going on. Are people bringing any new tech to the table? Are there any new decks creeping up that we need to have our eye on? So we found out Esper Pixie was kind of growing last week and the week before, and we saw some really great turnout for Esper Pixie, for instance, at SCG. So there's a lot of cool little things that we can uncover along the way. And sometimes I'm seeing them for the first time. I kind of take a look at the list before we jump into it, but I like to click into it and kind of uncover what's going on with you. And sometimes we get stumped. We ran into a couple decks last week that I had no idea what their actual win con was without actually sitting down for an hour and really kind of breaking it down. So without further ado, because we have such a long list, we're going to go ahead and jump into it and take a look at what's going on. So as I said, we have a lot of tournaments going on. So we're going to skip over some of these tournaments. So like standard leagues, we don't really care about. We really care about more of the in-person. We care about the challenges in MTGO. There's arena big tournaments that we'll take a look at. And if you're wondering what website I'm using, I am using mtgdex.net. I will include a link below in my video as well, just so that you can review these yourself. But we go over into the standard, and then we take a look at the standard tournaments. But this is the first week that we've had to go to the second page to really get the first event of January 3rd. But the first event of January 3rd was a league, so we're going to ignore that. But we will jump into the challenge. And why do we like the MTGO challenge? Well, because the MTGO challenge actually declares a first place. So it's a big event. You got to register it. They happen ever so often. And they actually define a first place, a second place, and then you have third and fourth. And what do we see? We talked a little bit about it. Esper Pixies here. But we'll go down to the top 4. We actually see 2 Esper Pixies and 2 Gruul Aggros. So I think this is going to be a theme that we're going to see over the next handful of tournaments. But we'll take a look at this Esper Pixie, see if there's anything crazy. If you're not familiar with Esper Pixie, the whole game plan of Esper Pixie is to get enchantments down, get certain cards down, and then bounce them back into your hand, and then you're bouncing your opponent's cards off of the table. You're generally making a bunch of otters, making those otters big, swinging in with them. So it's a lot of control with bouncing cards off of the battlefield into folks' hands. So you have things like Fear of Isolation, Nurturing Pixie. So the reason for it being Esper rather than Dimir, now there is Dimir versions of this deck, is because you get access to Nurturing Pixie, super cheap, can pull something off of the battlefield. Optimistic Scavenger is here because you are playing a lot of enchantments. The Spiteful Hex Mage here, this is another enchantment, so it works well with the Optimistic Scavenger. You can also bounce this negative enchantment off of the Hex Mage and make this a 3/2 right off the bat. This one's running in Overlords. This Town Ain't Big Enough is a key piece. This one's also running some Go for the Throats, Gix's Command, Hopeless Nightmare. And then Nowhere to Runs is the big removal because you can keep, play this, bounce it, play it again, keep removing. Hopeless Nightmare, same thing. Put it on, make them discard, bounce it back to your hand, play it again, make them discard a card, and they're losing 2 life every time. And then if you need to groom your library in any way, it does have the sacrifice capability. But then this is where you're making all your otters. Storm Chaser's Talent. We're seeing price go up on Storm Chasers because popularity is going up. And then this one is also taking advantage of Kaito. So Kaito is one of the best black and or just Dimir cards out there. So this is a really interesting version of Esper Pixie, and I think we're going to see a lot of evolution of Esper Pixie. Over in the sideboard, we got some Graveyard Hate, we got some counter spells, some more removal, exile removal, Sheltered by Ghost, Creature of the Schism. This is really good against aggro decks. Cutzel's Flanker is a new one, though, for me. And it's a flash, and when it enters the battlefield, choose one. Put a 1/1 counter on Cutzel Flanker for each creature that left the battlefield under your control this turn. Gain 2 life. Exile target player's graveyard. So more Graveyard Hate, which is definitely needed for those Azorius decks, and another Gix's Command. Okay, so that was the 4th place Esper Pixie. Then we have the 3rd place Gruul. I don't think we're going to see much difference in Gruul. Gruul aggro is pretty baked in. You're running your mouse package with the Hired Claw, couple Paw Patch recruits, a Questing Druid. So the number of Questing Druids we see kind of goes up or down based on the player and what they like to see. Some 4 Burst Lightning, the Monstrous Rage, Wishstalker Frenzy, and then they're running a lot of Innkeeper's Talent. So generally you'll see this cut down to as low as 2, upping this to like 2 or 3, maybe adding another Paw Patch recruit, or another Witchstalker Frenzy. And then over in the sideboard, you keep it pretty straightforward. Lithomatic Barrage, Paw Patch, Questing Druid, Scorching Shot, and Torch the Tower. So now let's see what the 2nd place Esper Pixie. Like I said, there's going to be some differences, and we're already seeing some. It has Mockingbird. Mockingbird's great because it now mimics Fear of Isolation and Nurturing Pixie. So you can almost think of it as you having 7 Fear of Isolations or 7 Nurturing Pixies, or 7 Optimistic Scavengers, or like 5 Spiteful Hex Mages. So that's the cool thing about Mockingbird, is it really kind of acts as adding more to your core pieces. Like I said, this town ain't big enough, ain't going anywhere. We do see Bottomless Pit coming in, or Bottomless Pool coming in. This is a nice little like card draw engine for you. Also allows you to bounce something back to your hand. We saw Hopeless Nightmare, Nowhere's to Run. This one's running Shelter by Ghost in the main, Storm Chaser's Talent, like we saw, and Kaito. So I think people are really getting that value out of Kaito, even in the like more, or the original Esper Pixie. Like I said, there is a Dimir version of this bounce deck. It's oftentimes called Dimir Enchantments, and we'll see that probably as well. Then over in the sideboard, Destroy Evils, Lauren for Enchantment Hate, some counter spells, some counter abilities, some more Shelter by Ghost, Shrouded Shepherd. We are seeing this one. So this one's kind of interesting. As a sorcery, that creatures your opponents control get -1/-1 until end of your turn. So if they have a bunch of otters, for instance, or if they have a bunch of tokens, that's a good little board wipe for you. And then when Shrouded Shepherd enters the battlefield, target creature you control gets +2/+2 until end of turn. So it's a nice little value piece there. More Graveyard Hate, and Tithing Blade is a nice removal because, again, you can play it, bounce it, play it, bounce it, play it, bounce it. So all something to keep in mind. But we are seeing Gruul aggro kind of boil up to the top. And what we're going to see some of the numbers being fudged, like I said, is Questing Druid, Paw Patch. We'll see this one's not even running an Innkeepers, which is interesting. They're running Witchstalker Frenzy in the main, Burst Lightning, Scorching Dragonfire. That 3 damage exile is huge. That gets that Enduring Curiosity off the board. It also gets the Enduring Vitality. Is it Enduring Vitality? The green Enduring off the board as well, because that's a 3/3. So it can kill a couple big pieces in some of the key decks. So it's Scorching Dragonfire in the main. So this is interesting. So they dropped the Innkeepers entirely for more control, and they're really kind of taking advantage of things that have prowess, like your Ember Heart, for instance. So controlling the board, they got their value package out of their creatures, and then they also have this Barbed Batterfist that gives them an equipment that they can then equip to things like to trigger Paw Patch, trigger that Heartfire Hero, trigger the Ember Heart Challenger. So that's the value out of that Barbed Batterfist. So really interesting. Over in the sideboard, of course, Paw Patch Formation. You need that for the Enchantment Hate, destroying creatures with flying. It's a really good card. Torch the Towers, Some more questing druids, lithomatic barrage, fiery annihilation. This is one I haven't seen a ton of in the sideboard, but it deals 5 damage to target creature, exile up to 1 target equipment attached to that creature. If that creature would die this turn, exile it instead. So it is an exile effect at 5 damage, which is nice. And then Pyroclasm, again, just board wipe. All right, that is our first challenge. We're seeing Gruul aggro up at the top. We definitely are going to see that, and up in the top 3 at the very least. We're going to see a lot of Gruul aggro. Gruul aggro is really strong right now. And now we're getting into our first of many SCG Con Atlanta events. So you're going to see things like this Uncut Sheet Standard. We're going to see the RCQs. And then we're going to see a bunch of Japanese events as well. So let's go ahead and jump into our first SCG Con event. We see up in the first place here is the Esper Pixies. So I wonder how this event was done. We had a lot of like 4-0s. I bet you it was just based off of your record. You took a place. So we'll go top 4. Again, we're seeing Gruul aggro, Abzan aggro. We're seeing Dimir mid-range and an Esper Pixie. So over in Gruul aggro, like I said, we'll see some changing. Sometimes we see a reduction in Screaming Nemesis, but the Questing Druid, Paw Patch, this one's running a little bit less removal. They're going back onto the Innkeepers. They're running a Twisted Fealty in the sideboard, so nothing crazy. So for some of these that we see that are pretty standard, we're going to kind of cruise through them because we have a lot of events to get through. Now we're over here in this mono white. This is actually mono white tokens. So yeah, Overlord of the Mistmoors running one of, Carrot Cakes, the Get Lost, lots of control, Lay Down Arms, Sunfall, Caretaker's Talent, Archangel Elspeth. Then in the sideboard, more removal capabilities, Exercise, Destroy Evil, Rest in Peace for the Graveyard Hate, Authority of Councils for your aggro, red aggro decks, Realmbreaker Invasion Tree. This thing is pretty nuts. It costs 3. It's a legendary artifact. You pay 2, tap it. Target opponent mills 3 cards. Put a land card from their graveyard onto the battlefield tapped under your control. It gains if this land would leave the battlefield, exile it instead of putting it anywhere else. And then you can pay 10 and tap this. Sacrifice Realmbreaker, the Invasion Tree. Search your library for any number of Praetor cards. Put them onto the battlefield, then shuffle. So it's just a way for you to go get more lands. Really, because paying the 10 cost is crazy. Split Up is really good removal. I'm running it in any of my Boros decks. I really like it. Elspeth, Smite, and then again, more of that exile removal, again, targeting the green Enduring as well as the blue Enduring card. And getting rid of those and getting them off of the board is huge. So we looked at that. Let's look at the Dimir mid-range. This is a pretty standard Dimir mid-range, it looks like. We're running sort of the fairy version of Dimir. That gives you a bigger, better spell stutter. Often, I've had people have to pay like 5 before to counter this, which just puts it way out of the range. Just because you're running that Fey Bloom trick, and you might have a couple Fairy Masterminds down there. Nowhere to run. Running the Kaito package with the Enduring Curiosity for the massive card draw and card advantage. Over in the sideboard, we see the pretty standard Gix's Command. Gix's Command is huge. For the go wide boards, Preacher of the Schism for the aggro, Withering Torment. We sometimes see it, sometimes don't. Destroy target creature enchantment. You lose 2 life. It's just a cheap creature and enchantment removal. Duress, and then Minor Misstep. I haven't seen this one. Cardinate target spell with mana value 1 or less. So that could be really good against the Esper decks, Spyglass Sirens, the Cut Downs, the 1-cost mouse, the Ember Heart Hero, I think it is. But yeah, what is it? It's gonna drive me nuts. What is that? Heartfire Hero. Counters that. Counters Hired Claw. Counters Power Patch Recruit. Counters Monstrous Rage, Burst Lightning. So it's specific like red hate for sure. And then the top one, Esper Pixie. So again, we're seeing the Nurturing Pixie. We're seeing the Scavenger, Spiteful, Fear, Entity Tracker is one that I've seen like added or not added to this, because if you are playing a lot of enchantments, it does give you that card draw. So one of the downsides of the standard Esper Pixie deck is that you kind of play all your cards and you run out of cards really fast. So Entity Tracker really kind of helps you keep a full hand. This town ain't big enough. So this is whenever, which is the thing you got to pay attention to, because sometimes you are playing 2 or 3 enchantments in a turn. So you're drawing 2 or 3 cards if this is down on the battlefield. So something to keep in mind. New tech that we are seeing is the Defiled Crypt Cadaver Lab. So whenever 1 or more cards leave your graveyard, create a 2/2 black horror enchantment creature token. This ability, 1 or more triggers. So the nice thing about the Defiled Crypt side of that is if you use something like Storm Chaser's Talent, pull something out of your graveyard, you're going to get a little 2/2. And then you also have the other side of this, which is Cadaver Lab. When you unlock this door, return a target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So you can go back and get another creature card. So you can go ahead and get any of this creature package up here. So I'm seeing this pop up from time to time. Nothing crazy, but cool to see it kind of take a tournament. And then over in the sideboard, we got the Aggro Hate. We got more Destroy Evils, Knight of Grace, Hexproof from Black, which is really nice against any of the Dimir decks, and the Gruul decks, Counter Spells, Shelter by Ghost, and Shrouded Shepherd. All right. So we got our first SCG Con event. Now we are going to move into this event here. 251 players, massive, massive tournament. We're going to take a look at the top 4 again. Just outside of the top 4 is Esper Pixie, but I bet you one of these Dimir decks is actually going to be pretty close to the Esper deck, but we'll see. So all that to be said, pretty standard package, running Preachers in the main, because they probably just run against a lot of Gruul aggro, red aggro, Boros aggro, lots of reasons to maybe put that in the main. Keeping an Anoint in the main I always think is a good idea too. But then you have Cut Downs, Go for the Throat, Sheoldred's Edict, and Spell Stutter for controlling the board state, Nowhere to Run, and Kaito. So pretty standard over there. Over in the sideboard, nothing crazy here, just more to exemplify your game plan. Dimir Tempo, let's take a look here. So I think this is nearly the same with a little bit more Preacher of the Schisms. Control, over on the sideboard, nothing crazy. Running a Stab in a Malicious Compliance. Gix's Command, 3 steps ahead. So nothing crazy in that 3rd place deck. We're obviously seeing Gruul aggro near the top. We see some fudging of the numbers. They actually reduced Hired Claw to 2, brought Screaming Nemesis to 3, upped Paw Patch from 1 to 3. Seeing that Barbed Batterfist, running the 4 Monstrous Rages. Now they're putting 4 Torch the Tower, so they're putting a lot of value in the Torch the Towers for probably the exile effect of Torch the Tower. Burst Lightning, they brought down to 1. Obliterating Bolt, and then Innkeeper's Talent. Over in the sideboard, nothing crazy. Sentinel of the Nameless City is a little interesting. I guess the map tokens. And then Torch the Witness. Torch the Witness deals X damage to target creature. If excess damage was dealt to that creature this way, investigate. Nice way to maybe kill something bigger. So if it's a 6/6, for instance, you could potentially kill it, right? Now you have access to killing it with Torch the Witness. And then over here in first place, we're seeing just another really standard Dimir mid-range. This one is going to also be the Pixie version with the Fabloom Trick and Kaito, 4 of Kaito and 4 of Enduring for that card advantage. Over in the sideboard, more stuff just really kind of propelling the existing game plan. We're not seeing anything crazy here. So just a really solid Dimir mid-range deck is taking first. The next RCQ, 262 players, massive, massive, massive results. Again, starting on 4th place, mono red aggro, pretty standard, running Monastery Swift Spears as the additional creature addition, but you're just running 4 of. And then instances, 4 Lightning Strike, 4 Monstrous Rage, 3 Witch Stalker, 4 Burst Lightning. This is kind of a fun, fast deck. It does do well. And can kind of get in and do everything that it needs to do before anybody really gets their game plan off. Over in the sideboard, keeping those Torch the Tower, Sunspine Links is definitely really nice for any life gain decks. Lithomatic Barrage, Case of the Crimson Pulse. This is like if you find yourself just running out of cards, this is a good card draw engine for you. Of course, Urabrass Forge and Scorching Shot. And then we like to say this is Rakdos aggro. It's really just red aggro, but with Callous Sellsword, and you're running Cacophony Scamp. So Cacophony Scamp is really nice because you buff it way up, hit him for 7, and then you can sack it and then deal another 7 to him. So you can do 14 damage. And then you have things like Callous Sellsword. Same thing. You could do the same thing to your Heartfire hero. Buff it way up, swing on him, hit him for 7, and then Callous Sellsword, your Heartfire hero. And then I think that does target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to any other target, then sacrifice it. So this is where you can get like triple damage. So you do 7 because of Callous Sellsword, but then I think you also do 7 because of when Heartfire hero dies, it does 7 damage to the opponent. So Callous Sellsword is just a way to get in massive damage. Fugitive Codebreaker. This one I'm seeing from time to time. It's kind of interesting. 2 CMC, 1 colorless, 1 red, 2/1, creature goblin, prowess haste. Disguise 6. This cost is reduced by 1 for each instant and sorcery card in your graveyard. You may cast this card face down for 3 as a 2/2 creature with Ward 2, then turn it face up anytime for its disguise cost. And then when Fugitive Codebreaker is turned face up, discard your hand and then draw 3 cards. So if you have no cards in hand, this can get you 3 cards. So it's a nice little way to get some additional card draw. And then over here in the instances, we do see a little bit different approach. We see Might of the Meek gives you some more card draw, and Turn Inside Out, another way to get another card on the board. So it's just keeping more pressure. And then we do see the Leyline of Resonance, so doubling up on those Turn Inside Outs, those Monstrous Rages, the Might of the Meek, even Burst Lightning, right? So kind of cool little, really aggressive deck. We should actually take a look at the sideboard here real quick. Urbrass, we have Furnace Rains. This is a new one for me. 2 colorless and a red. It's a sorcery. Gain control of target creature until end of turn. Untap that creature until end of turn. It gains haste, and whenever this creature deals combat to a player or battle, create a treasure token. So basically get to steal a card and swing with it. So if they put a 6/6 down, turn it, steal it, swing on them. So if they're all about big creatures, it might be a way to turn the tides. Torch the Towers, Duress, Feed the Swarm. Do they actually have? Oh, they do. They actually have some black-red cards in here, and Sulphur Springs as well. So they have access to Duress and Feed the Swarm. Destroy target creature enchantment. Opponent controls you. Lose life equal to the permanent's converted mana cost. So this is fun. You can take out a 6/6 demon token, and it doesn't have a converted mana cost, so it doesn't cost you anything to get rid of that. Witchstalker Frenzy, again, 5 damage target. So an interesting sideboard. I've never really seen somebody lean into the Rakdos outside of that Callous Sellsword. Selesnya Aggro, I think this is the like Selesnya tokens deck. We've played this a little bit on stream. It's a fun deck that really is about building tokens and then pumping those tokens up with something like Sandsword Salvager. Malira is an interesting addition. I haven't seen Malira added. So Malira, if you would get 1 or more poison counters instead, you get 1 poison counter, and you can't get additional poison counters this turn. Exile Malira, the Living Curse. Choose another target creature or artifact. When you put into a graveyard this turn, return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control. Interesting. So this is like anti-poison card. Sky Knight Squire gets really buffed when a bunch of creatures come out. Collector's Cage can go get you stuff. Unidentified, Hover Ship, Soul Partition, Virtue of Loyalty. Over in the sideboard, we have an Invasion of Gobek Khan. Whenever it enters the battlefield, look at the target opponent's hand. You may exile a non-land card from it. For as long as that card remains exiled, its owner may play it. A spell cast this way costs 2 more. And then if you flip it, you get, at the beginning of your end step, put a 1/1 counter on each creature that attack this turn. Sacrifice it. Creatures you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. So nice little addition. Aven Interrupter is amazing. Sheltered by Ghost, amazing. Sunder Gateway. That's a little bit of a new one for me. Destroy target non-token artifact or enchantment an opponent controls. Incubate 2. Incubate 2. Oh no, I've seen this one. Elspeth Smite and Obstinate Bailiff. But Selesnya tokens. It's a fun deck. I haven't been able to pilot it to much success, but it is a fun deck. And then we have the Sultai Beanstalk. So this deck is, if it's popping off, it's so hard to deal with because you have the Eddie Merc Crabs. You're essentially paying 2 for this. You're tapping them down. Tolarian, you're essentially paying 1 for this every time. And then you have a bunch of instants and sorceries. So you're bouncing cards. You're going to retrieve cards. You're retrieving lands or more cards. This is just permanents, not just lands. Rona's Vertex, return target creature or planeswalker you don't control to its owner's hand, bouncing more cards, unsummon, bouncing more cards, sleight of hand, going to get cards, bushwhack, killing stuff, or getting more land. Same thing here. If you collect evidence, you may search your library for a creature and land card. So since you're just chocked full of instances and sorceries, because they're all really cheap, you're probably going to get like your pieces that you need for your deck. Storm Chaser's Talent and up the Beanstalk. So just a really solid like control deck, getting a lot of like big scary creatures out for really cheap. And you can always kind of go retrieve those those cards as well. Over on the sideboard, you have Basilisk Collar. This just sucks. It sucks so much to play against. Pay 1 and then put it on the board. Equip 2. Now creature has Death Touch and Lifelink, and they're just slamming that on a Tolarian or a Crab, which is just crazy. Or they can throw it on an Otter that they've buffed up, and now it has Death Touch, so it's just like a pain in the ass. Keen-Eyed Curator, Tear Asunder, Negate Swamps, Anoint with Affliction, Go for the Throat, Nowhere to Run, Shrouded Shepherd, and Glissa. Glissa's an interesting addition. Do they have actual access to black? Oh, they do. They're running Gloomlake Verge. Guess that's an easy way, and then they might, if they bring in Glissa or any other black cards, that's why they have a swamp in here. They might drop one of their basics or drop one of their dual lands and add the swamp in there. So interesting approach to the Sultai Beanstalk. So Sultai Beanstalk, I mean, this tournament is all over the place that's going on in Atlanta right now. Next up, though, is going to be in Japan. 47 players, a lot less than what we got going on in Atlanta. But let's take a look at what's going on over in Japan. We have a lot of Dimir going on. So top 4, let's take a quick look. Nothing crazy. Oh, so this is the Dimir version of the Esper Pixies. So this is more taking advantage of the really strong Dimir cards like your Kaito in there, and then you have your Floodpit's Drowner in there. Normally you see Enduring, so I'm surprised I'm not seeing Enduring in this. But then lots of removal package, and then you have your enchantments that you're bouncing. And then over in the sideboard, nothing crazy other than the Filigree Silex. We're seeing that pop up from time to time. Let's take a look at the Golgari mid-range. Thrun, we talked about Thrun last week. We're going to see more and more Thrun in the main, most likely, in the Golgari decks. But it's a standard package so far. Good removal, duress, and then they are running the Annex version over in the sideboard. Maelstrom Pulse has been performing well. Vivian Reed does well. Nissa also does well. And then Tranquil Throwback is a good one for enchantment removal. And then let's go see what we got here on the next one. Now the webpage is deciding to be really slow. And so going over here to Dimir midrange. This one is a 38% on the spicy meter versus the last one that we took a look at, Dimir midrange. It was a 78. So we'll see what's different here. This one's the standard Dimir. They're not even running. Oh, this is not standard Dimir. They have the Enduring, or the Fear of Isolation, Enduring Curiosity, Floodpit's Drowner, good removal package, but also including This Town Ain't Big Enough for bouncing. And then we have the enchantments, right? Hopeless Nightmare, Storm Chaser's Talent, and the Nowhere to Run, and then running 3 Kaitos. So this is more in line with like somebody's taking the Esper Pixie, and then somebody is taking the Dimir mid-range and really kind of putting those two together and coming up with this deck that's performing really well. So you're kind of, let's take all of the good cards from Dimir mid-range. Let's take the good cards from Esper Pixie. Let's simplify the mana base and put those two together. And that's what we get. Negates, duress, nothing crazy here. So we'll keep cooking. And then let's see the final. First place is running actually the standard Dimir. So the standard Dimir is still pulling it out. Like, so we've talked about this. The Dimir is considered the strongest deck for like one primary reason. It has the highest skill ceiling. There's a secondary reason I'll talk about. So to pilot a Dimir deck to the extent of its capabilities makes it one of the best decks, because at the extent of its capabilities, it's going to do better than every deck. But it's so hard to pilot it at that level. And then do that all day. So like the folks that won the SCG Con tournament, they had done like 18 matches over 2 days. So you're doing 9 matches a day. I don't know if you've ever done a tournament, but if you have, like the most I've done in a day is 5 or 6, and I'm just absolutely spent. So adding another 4 or 3 or 4 on top of that, like that's crazy. Like you got to pay attention to your diet. You got to hydrate. You got to find time to go to the bathroom, all of these crazy things. But so pilot this deck and pilot it well for so long over a big tournament is really crazy. But this deck does really well. This is pretty close to the standard Dimir package. So let's go back and take a look at the sideboard, see if we're seeing anything crazy. The filigree, Silex, the neutralize the guards. Target creature opponents control get -1/-1 until end of turn. You get to surveil 2, and then more nowhere to runs. So amazing. So the secondary thing that we see with Dimir that makes it so good is, let me finish this thought, is that there are so many different versions of Dimir. So you might see them play a Darkslick Shore, and you're like, oh, cool, I'm playing up against a Dimir deck. But then you have to ask yourself, am I doing the Dimir enchantment decks? Is this the Dimir mid-range deck? Is this a tempo version? There's even considered a Dimir aggro version where you're just loading up on those really cheap cards and then getting value from the Enduring and the Kaito to really take advantage of those. So there's like, you just don't know what you're going to walk into with Dimir. That's the secondary strength of Dimir. So let's go ahead and take a look. This calling this red-green aggro, so this is just the Gruul aggro deck. Nothing crazy here, just changing up some of the numbers over in the sideboard. We're not seeing anything crazy there. Now we got another Esper Pixie deck. Again, pretty standard Esper Pixie. We're not seeing anything super noteworthy other than putting like Defiled Crypts in the sideboard. We've seen it in the main so far. We got another Esper Pixie taking second place. Again, no new tech. A Final Vengeance in the main is interesting because you do make some of the otter tokens. You do have enchantments that sometimes you just don't want to bounce back. So taking advantage of that and being able to exile a target creature for 1, I think is interesting. So that's something to be on the lookout. They might be rocking a Final Vengeance. So we got some new tech. We got some new tech there. Over in the sideboard, we're seeing the Destroy Evils, Witch's Vanity. This is a newer one. This is a enchantment saga. 1 colorless, 1 black. Destroy target creature and opponent controls with mana value 2 or less. You get then at the second level there, create a food token. Third level, create a Wicked Roll token and attach that to a target creature you control. Pretty interesting. As far as everything else, they added a little bit of a card discard function in here with Bandit's Talent, Entity Tracker. We talked about that, getting your card draw, which is really nice, and then Ghost Vacuum for the graveyard hate. And then we'll look at another Gruul aggro, a pretty standard package. They played with some of the numbers again as well, Innkeepers, and then over in the sideboard, running Sunspine Links. Yeah, pretty standard Gruul aggro. Package there. And then now we're back to another event at SCG Con. We're gonna have many of these. We're gonna keep seeing these. All right, so Jund Beanstalk. So we haven't seen a lot of this yet, but Jund Beanstalk is basically like overlords, the Selesnya overlords that we see. Actually, like the 3-color, 4-color overlords that we see, but it's just 3-color. Deadly Cover Up, Pulse-Struck Maelstrom, Nowhere to Run, Up the Beanstalk. Yeah, basically it's kind of playing the same way. Control the board. It's got the Herd Migration. It's got some more removal, Nowhere to Runs, and then Up the Beanstalk. And then it's really about getting these overlords out. And then has a couple other really strong black cards to round it out with Shoulder of the Apocalypse and Harvester of Misery. Over on the sideboard, we're running some really good black cards like Duress, Cruelty of Crix, The End, Tear Sunders for that enchantment hate, as well as just straight up exile. Scrap Shooter is really interesting. So it's a 4/4 for 3. It has gift a card, reach, and then when Scrap Shooter enters, if a gift was promised, destroy target artifact or enchantment an opponent controls. So that's actually Esper, or like the Esper Pixie or Dimir enchantment hate. You do see it a little bit in the Golgari, needing some hate there for enchantments, but that's pretty interesting. Pyroclasm for the board wipes, Obstinate Baloth, and then we talked about the Duress. And then, so that was the Jund Beanstalk, and now here we see the Overlords that I talked about. So the Zur Overlords, you're running the Mistmoors, the Flood Pits, and the Hauntwoods, and then you got Zur, which is your sort of combo piece. Some good control and removal with Elspeth Smite, Get Lost, Sunfall, Leyline Binding, and then Temporary Lockdown. And then you also have the Beanstalk, which is needed. Super complicated mana base for that. It's kind of the downside. So you're really hoping to get a Hauntwoods down early to kind of smooth out the mana base. Over in the sideboard, we got the Temporary Lockdown, Authority Consoles, Tear Sunder, some Graveyard Hate, some more removal, some more enchantment hate, more specific creature hate, kind of shut down a whole game plan. And then Obstinate Baloth. Again, as a reminder, Obstinate Baloth is a 4/4 for 2 colorless and 2 green. And when it enters the battlefield, you gain 4 life. If a spell or an ability an opponent controls causes you to discard Obstinate Baloth, put it onto the battlefield instead. So this is fun. Keep it in your hand, and then you have the Dimir enchantments, and then you have the Esper decks. You're just get to play this. Wait for them to make you discard a card, and then you're putting a 4/4 on the board and gaining 4 life. Fun card. Dimir midrange. So we see the standard. Yep, pretty standard Dimir package. Doing really well, taking second. And then first is the Gruul aggro again, playing with some of the numbers. They've upped the paw patches in here. Our Question Druid is usually around 2, so that's pretty fine. Reduced the Innkeepers, added an Obliterating Bolt, and a Witch Doctor Frenzy, and then have the Burst Lightning and Monstrous Rage. Over in the sideboard, nothing crazy other than an Obstinate Baloth, which is hilarious. So you're just sideboarding this against the Dimir and Esper sort of bounce decks that we get out there. Cool. That was the Saturday standard event. All right, we have finished all of Friday. We are into Saturday. Now we get to go to page 1. Like I said, we have a lot to cover. This might be a little bit longer episode. So if you're hanging with us, I appreciate you. Thank you very much. And that would be a perfect time to remind you. If you've made it this far in the video, you might as well do the thing. Like, subscribe, leave a comment below. We're going to keep powering through. We're going to finish Saturday, and then we're going to move on into Sunday. I appreciate all the support. Thank you so much. Let me know what you're getting out of these videos. This is a new series I'm doing. I believe this is like the 3rd video I've done in this series. I'm having fun kind of taking a look, because this is weekly study that I do to see what decks are performing really well, and I wanted to share that with you. So if you're a competitive player and wanted to learn, it's kind of like where you should go, what sort of decks you should be playing, what's doing well, what new tech kids might be evolving, this is the place to do it. Come here, hang out, let's have some discussions, leave all those comments below, and then if you want me to cover additional things, let me know those as well. So let's jump back into it and keep cooking. So another Saturday event, and we see, actually, I think this is the same event. I don't know why it kind of went back over to the other page. So now we have Austria. We'll take a look at Austria. Some of these other regions, we see Esper Pixie, Boros Aggro, Jeskai Convoke, and then an Esper Pixie taking this tournament. So we're going to quickly scroll through this, see if we see any new tech. The big one here is that they're adding 3 entity trackers. I think they're running into what I ran into when I played this deck, is I kind of always ran out of cards. So the entity tracker is really nice to put in there. Go for Throat in the main, which is interesting. And then pretty standard package over there. Kaito in the sideboard. Rest in Peace for the Graveyard Hate. Some... and then Split Ups, and then Shoshana's Tidebinder. So this is kind of bleeding into that, taking some of the really good cards from the Dimir midrange and putting it in the Esper Pixie. Now they're calling this one Boros. Let's see why we're calling it Boros, because in the sideboard they got Sheltered by Ghosts and Destroy Evil. In the main board, though, they're going with a really standard like red aggro deck, and then if they need to change it up, they do have the mana base for the Boros side of things. And then they're able to add things like the Destroy Evil and the Shelter by Ghost, which can do some absolute work. And then getting some more card draw from Case of the Crimson Pulse. And then obviously Pyroclasm and Torch the Tower. Jeskai Convoke. This one's been fun. I've been wanting to play this deck, but I do not have enough uncommon, weirdly enough, cards in my arena account to be able to play this. So the whole deck is super aggressive, using things like Imoden's create Recruiter. When it enters the battlefield, creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain haste. You combine that with something like Goblin Surprise or Gleeful Demolition, and then you can destroy a artifact that you might have, and then make a bunch of these red goblin tokens, and then swing. And then you have a bunch of other really cheap creatures that you're using to tap down the Warden and make that bigger. You can also, I think there's another one, yeah. Knight of Errant is another one that takes advantage of the Convoke capabilities there. And so the whole thing is go wide, pump the creatures, and swing. And it does it really fast, and it's fun. So this is a pretty standard version of this that I've seen. Over on the right-hand side, they're adding the Destroy Evil, the Get Lost, a Kaito. Interesting. Protect the Negotiators. It has a kicker. If the spell is kicked, create a 1/1 white soldier creature token. Counter target spell unless its controller pays 1 for each creature you control. And since you've gone so wide, this is going to be really hard to counter. Rest in Peace for the Graveyard Hate. Shelter by Ghost is just so good. It's worth adding more if you can. And then Torch the Tower there. So Jeskai Convoke, really fun deck. But then who took this tournament over in Austria is another Esper Pixie deck. And we're seeing the entity tracker in the main, pretty standard package along the board. Over on the sideboard, again, they kind of have this discard, running some Kaitos. So bleeding in some of the Dimir mid-range as we just discussed. All right, let's take a look at the Philippines. Make this one quick. Red deck wins. Yep, pretty standard red deck wins. Nothing crazy. Case of the Crimson Pulse. Tectonic Edge is a little bit new. Add 1 to your mana pool. Destroy target non-basic land. Activate this ability only if an opponent controls 4 or more lands. Interesting land hate. Haven't seen much of that. We got more of the Domain Zur Overlords deck. Nothing crazy here. Taking a look. Authority of Consoles on the side. Not on my watch on the side. We don't see a lot of those, but we do see some of those. Dimir midrange, of course, doing really well. This is going to be the standard Dimir midrange. Yep. Seeing if there's any new tech in this. Pretty standard Dimir midrange. Obviously, they fudge the numbers a little bit and do something a little bit different here and there based off of what they might see in their meta, but it's the standard package. And then one of my favorite, the good old Boros Mice. This is a deck I own. Really standard package here. I think you run... I haven't really seen much of a different list for the actual main board for this. Like even down to the number. So the 4/4/4s, 2 Mabels, 2 Flowerfoot, 4, 1 Screaming Nemesis, 4, 2, 4, and then 3 and 3, or 3 and 4. So like down to the numbers, this is a pretty static deck, but it does well. It does well. Then over in the sideboard, Destroy Evil. I see this switched up though. Lithomatic Barrage, more Screaming Nemesis, Torch the Tower, or Forge, and Witchstalker Frenzy. So nice Philippines Mice win. Always like to see that. Smaller tournament here. So we're just going to take a look at the top 2. We see a Rakdos aggro. I think it's, again, Rakdos because they don't have Callous Sellsword, but they are running Nowhere to Run. Interesting. That's the only red card they're running. So it's mainly the mono red aggro running Nowhere to Run as the black source, and then a Dimir mid-range deck, and this is going to be the pretty standard Dimir. Running a Mockingbird, which is nice because it basically makes one of extra everything, as we've discussed. And then over in the sideboard, pretty static as well. Cool. Philippines, or the New York event was sort of small. We'll take a look at Midwest Jedi. Again, smaller event, so we'll take a look at the top 2. And we're seeing the mono red prowess deck. And then over on the sideboard, pretty standard sideboard. So nothing crazy. You just run 4 of your aggressive package. Then you put in a bunch of Burst Lightning, Lightning Strikes, and Witchstalker Frenzy, and then Monstrous Rage, of course. Cool. And then Esper Pixie won this one. And again, nothing crazy other than running Mockingbird in Tithing Blade. I like Tithing Blade. It might be a little too slow, but it does do work. And especially if they go wide on you, it's a little difficult to get a ton of value out of it. But outside of that, pretty standard package. Over in the sideboard, running Kaitos, Entity Tracker, Knight of Grace, Pest Control. Destroy all non-land permanents with mana value 1 or less. That's really funny. And then Shrouded Shepherd and Stab. So those go wide decks don't stand a chance against that that Pest Control. All right, MTGO Standard Qualifier. Let's go ahead and take a look at this. This is going to be a bigger event. So we'll take a look at the top 4. So we have Boros Forge, Beza, Enduring Innocent, Realmbreaker, the Invasion, Shamil, the Inner Sun. Spells you control can't be countered at the beginning of your end step. Discover 5. Urbrass Forge, Get Lost, Torch the Tower, Lightning Helix, Sunfall, Season of the Burrow, Caretaker's Talent, and Temporary. So really, you're trying to get like Enduring Innocence down and get a bunch of card draw, but it's kind of like a go wide, and then has like this generator effect as well. And then Planeswalkers running Quintaris Can, Karn the Living Legacy, and Archangel Elspeth. Over in the sideboard, Exercise, Ghost Vacuum, Sunfalls, Metropolis Reformer. What is this? All right, this is 3 CMC, 2/3. Flying Vigilance, you have Hexproof. Whenever Metropolis Reformer is dealt damage, you gain that much life. Interesting. Stone Brain, I think this is a great card. Urbrass Forge, Temporary Lockdown, and another Quintoris Can. So since they put another one of these in here, I'm going to read what it does. Whenever you cast a spell from exile, Quintoris Can deals 2 damage to each opponent and you gain 2 life. Create a 3/2 red and white spirit creature token. -4 or -3 it, discover 4. Exile any number of target cards from your graveyard. Add red for each card exiled. This way, you may play those cards until the end of this turn. Interesting. This is I don't know if I've seen that deck. Then we got 2 Esper Pixie decks. Let's see if anything's changed. Nope, pretty standard. Not running the card draw engine, but pretty standard. Esper Pixie over here. This one's running Baelmerk and Sheoldreds in the main. You got to get some little extra high end for you, and then or top end of the deck. Ghost Vacuum, No More Lies, Blot Out, Shelter Preacher. Yep. So they're just taking advantage of some of the really strong black cards as well. Give yourself a little bit more oomph at the end of the game. And then we have the Azurius Tempo deck. This is why everybody has sideboards Graveyard Hate. Haughty Djinn, Picklocker Prankster, Aberrant Oculus, and then Moment of Truth, Negate, Unsummon, Soul Partition, and then here you go. Using things like Helping Hand and Recommission to bring those things out of the graveyard back onto the board. Or you could potentially even hit, when you Manifest Dread, one of these Haughty Djinns or another Aberrant Oculus. And then good removal with Split Up. And then Founding the Third Path also allows you just to cast a bunch of spells, feeding that graveyard. And then over on the sideboard, Exercise, Fairy Mastermind, Negate, Beza, Split Up, Authority of Councils, and Lord of the Third Path. So good enchantment hate over there. It's a fun little deck, but if somebody sideboards in that Graveyard Hate, it gets a little bit difficult. Okay, so next up is the standard challenge. We had 65 players, so we'll take a look. Red deck wins, pretty standard. Tectonic Hazard, we're seeing more of those, but pretty standard package there. We have another red deck wins in the top 4. You get the running of the 4 ofs, and then 4 of everything, and then 3 Witchstalker. Card draw, Tectonic Hazard, almost the same deck list. Demir Midrange, are we running anything crazy? We're brought back the Deep Cavern Bats. This is the other thing, like some people do and don't play Deep Cavern Bats. So you got to like, am I playing around Deep Cavern Bats or am I not playing when going up against the Demir? But then they're running a lot of like one-ofs. So Gix, Mockingbird, Shieldred, and Tishana's. So they're just giving themselves some options. Then really solid removal, some counter spells. So they've done Phantom Interference instead of the pixie based one, spell something. I always forget. And then Kaito, and then over here, good more removal, just making your deck do this one, Fabloom Trick. Nope, not Fabloom Trick. It's the counter spell that works well with Fabloom Trick. Gix's Command, Malicious Compliance, so get some board wipes, some good aggro, anti-aggro. And then finally, mono white tokens took this event. Pretty standard mono white tokens. Not ossification in the main is interesting. I do like ossification. Not a lot of people run like basic land hate. Boonbringer Valkyrie. This is a backup one. Flying first strike lifelink. Elspeth's Might. Regal Caracal. Other cats you control get +1/+1 and have lifelink. You making a lot of cats? Where the hell are you making cats? When enters the battlefield, create 2 1/1 cat creature tokens with lifelink. That's interesting. I mean, it's not like a cat deck, so not getting huge value off of that. So that was the standard challenge. We're looking at the other standard challenge here with 42 players. It's not a super big tournament, but we'll quickly look at top 4 entity tracker in the main in this Esper Pixie deck. And then pretty standard sideboard, nothing crazy there. We'll go through this Esper Pixie deck, Spiteful Hexmage. So obviously playing with some of the numbers. So this is more of, the only reason it's Esper, oh, no, they added these ones, never mind. They did add Kaito into this, which is interesting. And then Tiny Bones Jones Up. Haven't seen that in the side. I have seen it in the main. But the fact that was inside. Then we have Demir Midrange. This is a standard Demir Midrange, so nothing crazy here. Right? Standard. Yep. Preacher, 4 Preachers in the main. I think they just really are scared of the aggro decks. So they're just running all the Preachers. And then finally, Azorius Omniscience. So I haven't seen this deck. Not entirely sure what it's trying to do. So this is going to be one of those ones where I think they're trying to cheat Omniscience onto the board. Because otherwise it's really hard to pay for. Yeah, we're going to have to spend some time really researching this deck. But this is a new deck for us. So we've run into this in the past. If we've run into a deck that is going to take a long time to sort of decipher what is in here, I'm going to leave it up on the screen for a second here. I'm going to just go through this soliloquy that I'm currently talking about, or talking through, and say this is one. It won a tournament. It won a MTGO standard challenge with 42 players. So it was a best of 3. You got 5 rounds of best of 3. So deck, or 9 rounds, I'm sorry, 9 rounds of best of 3, and went 8-1. So this might be a deck for you to consider. I'm not entirely sure the win condition of this deck because this is the first time I'm seeing it. So this is one that we'll want to, I'm actually going to duplicate this tab and save it for later for review. Okay, so 42 players. Then we have Japan. We always like taking a look at Japan. It's a smaller tournament, though, and we have 2 Gruul aggro decks, so we'll quickly look. See, are they doing anything crazy here? They're just fudging some of their numbers around, but nothing crazy with that Gruul aggro. Same thing here. Almost the same exact deck list as the guy before. So 26 players, and then we have a small tournament in Minnesota. Boros Mice wins. 27 players, so we'll just look at the top two. Esper Self Bounce. This is just the Esper Pixie deck. Yep. So nothing crazy here. And then Boros Mice. Like I said, this package is almost exactly the same wherever you look at it, with some sideboard changes. So Boros Mice can still win tournaments. Go do your local RCQs with Boros Mice. Magic Spotlight Foundation. So we're back into Atlanta. 1,453 players. We are absolutely taking a look at the top 4, maybe even the top 8 here. We'll cover the top 8, but we're not gonna. I think we'll just click into them quickly. Gruul aggro, pretty standard Gruul aggro deck. Running an Obliterating Bolt in the main. In the sideboard, nothing crazy. I think we're gonna see a lot of Gruul aggro here. Another Gruul aggro in the top 8. Yep, playing around with some numbers, adding a Kellen. So sometimes you see Kellen, sometimes you don't see Kellen. So you don't see Kellen a lot more than you do see. I'll be honest there. So it has its value, but it's give or take. But in this Gruul deck, they're not even running the Questing Druid, but not even in the sideboard. So really interesting. They are mainly running it for protection and for like removal is the reason but it's more of like a red aggro deck than it is anything else. So that person was in 7th place. And now we'll take a look at 6th place here as soon as it loads. So 7th place was 2 Gruul aggros, and then we have Azorius aggro, and then we have another Azorius tempo above that, Temur Otters, and then we're gonna have Domain Control as well. So what is Azorius aggro? Oh yeah, this is the sort of like enchantments deck, which is fun. So essentially, you're really just kind of like pumping your board. You're being able to tap stuff down for the Warden of the Inner Sky. It's sort of a go wide, make a big Regal Bunnycorn, give it flying because you came in with Mockingbird and made it. And then other than that, you're going wide on your board, getting a bunch of card draw, doing some control with Flood Pits, Bloom Trick, and then Shelter by Ghosts. Over on the sideboard, you're running some removal and some more control. And then Azorius Oculus. This is the one that we've seen before where all the graveyard hate, adding a Kiora. So we were seeing Kiora sometimes. Into the Floodmaw for bounce, counter spells, card draw, more card gain, some removal, card gain, and then of course going to get your cards with Helping Hand and Recommission. I'm surprised those numbers are so low, but that is, it took top 8, so can't be too upset about that. Doorkeeper's Roll. Flash, flying, artifacts and creatures entering the battlefield don't cause abilities to trigger. Interesting. That is an anti-pixie deck for sure. All right, top 4. We're going into Temur Otters. Temur Otters did make a deep run into the bigger tournament. Enduring Vitality, Valley Floodcaller, Thundertrap Trainer, Questing Druid. So the whole way this wins is it makes a bunch of Otters, and it goes and finds its key pieces with things like Analyze the Pollen. Is it just Analyze the Pollen? I thought there was another one. Oh, Bushwhack. Is it Bushwhack? Nope, that just gets land. All right, so this one's just going for card draw. But then you can play your non-creature spells as though they had flash. So you can cast your sorceries. Oh, no, we already talked about that. Like Song of Totentans. Creating a bunch of rats. Your rats all get buffed with... They have prowess? Rats don't have prowess. But then with Valley Floodcaller, Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, birds, frogs, otters, and rats you control get +1/+1 until end of turn and then untap them. So you tap them for mana with Enduring Vitality, and then you get a bunch of mana, cast your stuff like Storm Chaser's Talent, make some more otters, cast a bunch of cheap stuff like Analyze the Pollen, Bushwhack, Burst Lightning, Torch the Tower, and then all of your stuff is getting buffed, and then you're getting the mana from tapping your own creatures. You're making more creatures, and then they're coming in all super big, and you kind of do it all in one turn, is the crazy part. So it's a really cool deck. It's a combo deck. So if you're a combo player, highly encourage you. Take a look at this deck. Here's the full deck list. We'll scroll down so you can see the full mana list as well. And then over in the sideboard, Paw Patch, Lithomatic, Rebel Salvo. What does this one do? Okay. Rebel Salvo. Affinity for equipment. Rebel Salvo deals 5 damage to target creature or planeswalker. That permanent loses indestructible until end of turn. Interesting. Bonehorde, Dracosaur, Screaming Nemesis, Up the Beanstalk, Dissection Tools, Obstinate Baloth, and Bitter Reunion. So if you're looking for the combo deck, that's it. Is taking a look at the Teamer Otters. Then we have Domain Control. So this is a Zur Overlords deck where they put a little bit more control into it with Day of Judgment, Split Up, Sunfall, Get Lost, Elspeth's Smite, and Leyline Bindings. But then you're running the Overlord package with one of Beza, Atraxa. 3 of Zur seems interesting because like Zur is your big combo piece. Like you really want Zur. And then Dimir Enchantments. So this is the Dimir version of the Esper Pixie deck. Fear of Isolation, you're bouncing stuff like your Nowhere to Run, Storm Chaser Talent, Hopeless Nightmare. But then it's running the really strong pieces from Dimir like Kaito, Enduring Curiosity, the Spyglass Siren, and Floodpits Drowner. So it's a good combination. And this deck did really well. Scott McNamara took second place with it. And then first place, this was the big tournament. This was the one that went on Sunday night, last night. Stayed up, watched it. It was Gruul Aggro, took the win. Cacophony Scamp with Heartfire Hero, Callous Sellsword, Emberheart Challenger, Questing Druid, Slickshot Show Off, Monstrous Rage, Snakeskin Veil, Turn Inside Out, Overprotect, in Leyline of the Resonance, or of Resonance. Over in the sideboard, Burst Lightning, Innkeeper's Talent, Lithomatic Barrage, Paw Patch Recruit, Screaming Nemesis, and Twisted Fealty. So good old Nicholas Odenheimer managed to take the tournament with Gruul Aggro. It was a great game to watch. It was fast. It was a fast finals, but it was still a good game to watch. Dimir Enchantments also super strong, and then Teamer Otters did well as well. So if you're looking for a combo deck, Teamer Otters is where you want to be. So that was Saturday, but then I think this is also repeated somewhere up there as well. So going into Sunday, we have another RCQ at SCG Con. This is mono red, or this is a 81 players. We'll take a look at the top 4. We got Orzhov Control, Felden's King, Carrot, Maze Mine. Let's scroll all the way down so you can see the full mana base here. Treasure Map, Get Lost at End, Neutralize the Grounds, Outrageous Robbery, Shouldered Edict, Go for the Throat, Anoint. So this was a fun little project for this person. I've seen some versions of this deck in like Arena, but it does get a little crazy here. So that's Orzhov. Gruul Aggro, pretty standard package again we're going to see here. Yeah, nothing crazy. And then nothing crazy. Taking fourth, or this would be third place. Dimir Midrange. This I think is going to be a standard Dimir. Yep, standard Dimir. Adding Shieldreds to the main is probably the only tech that we're seeing here. And then no new tech in the sideboard. And then mono red aggro. Here we go. Standard package, like I said, almost down to the sideboard is even the same in that mono red. So that was the RCQ, 81 players. And then we have the $10,000 RCQ on Sunday, getting 320 players. We'll briefly take a look at what did top 8. So we had a Dimir mid-range, another Gruul Aggro, mono white tokens, and then a Gruul Aggro. And then we see Sultai Beanstalk. So again, this is the old crab in Tolarian Terror. Control the board, sorceries, enchantments, sideboard. Pretty Stormweaver in the sideboard's interesting. Adding the swamp in case they add more black cards. Minor Misstep, we saw that one before as well. Let's back out of that. And then we have Gruul Aggro with a black splash. Oh, the Callous Sellsword. So Callous Sellsword in a Gruul Aggro deck. Really interesting. Overprotect, Leyline of Resonance. So this is, they've combined Gruul Aggro and in sort of like this mono red aggro, Rakdos aggro version. So this is kind of like this really interesting hybrid with the Callous Sellsword, 4 Questing Druids, Skin Veil, Overprotect, and then Leyline of the Residence. They really tried to make that one happen. Went 8-1 and 2 for that deck. Selesnya Control. We're seeing Overlord of the Hauntwoods, Carrot Cake, Get Lost. Yep, lots of control, Authority of the Councils in the main, which is interesting. Over in the sideboard, more of the Authority of Councils, Exercise, Rest in Peace, Sarah Paragon, and Vivian Reed. Pretty interesting. And then Selesnya Tokens took it. So this is the one that we talked about, which is sort of go wide, put counters on stuff deck, and managed to take the tournament. So a little bit interesting tech. Malira in the main, Tender Wild Guide in the main, and then Overlord of the Mistmoors being in this deck is also interesting. Over on the right-hand side, Aven Interrupter, Beza, Obstinate Bailiff, Devout Decree, and Paw Patch Formation, and then the rest in peace. And that will take the $10,000 tournament at Atlanta. Next up is the RCQ in the Philippines. This is going to be a smaller tournament, so we'll just take a look at the top 2. We have mono white control tokens, and so we're seeing the addition of Sarah Paragon to the main, which is interesting. As far as everything else that's in this, we have Get Lost, Soul Partition, Lay Down Arms. I think Lay Down Arms is really good in mono white. Split Up, your Sunfall, Caretaker's Talent, and an Archangel Elspeth. Over in the sideboard, Authority of Councils, a Dust Animus, which is interesting. So haven't seen this one. It is a 2 CMC, 2/3 flying. If you control 5 or more untapped lands, Dust Animus enters the battlefield with 2 1/1 counters and lifelink, and a lifelink counter on it. You can also plot it, which is really interesting. So you can plot it, bring it out when you have 5 lands untapped, and then it's really a 4/5 with flying. Interesting. More Elspeth Smite, Exercise, Jace the Perfected Mind, and some Rest in Peace for that Graveyard Hate. Next up is the Simic Animals. This is just what we've been seeing with the Crab and the Terror. A bunch of instants and sorceries to control the board. Storm Chaser's Talent, up the Beanstalk. And then the sideboard, we see the Stormweaver again, some Terra Sunder, Swamped. If you're sideboarding in a little bit more black, you'll bring in the Swamp as well. Go for the Throat and an Anoint with Affliction. All right, so that finishes the RCQ in the Philippines. We're going to skip over the MTGO League, but we will jump into the MTGO Standard Challenge. This is a bigger event, so we will take a look at the top 4 and see how this went. So Esper Pixie, again, we're seeing a lot of that. So running the Mockingbirds, really giving you more access to your set pieces here. Running, of course, This Town Ain't Big Enough, Hopeless Nightmare, Bottomless Pool, Nowhere to Run, Shelter by Ghost, Storm Chaser's Talent, and Defiled Crypt in the main, and then trickling in some of those Kaitos. Over in the sideboard, Rest in Peace, Get Lost, Tithing Blade, No More Lies, The Shrouded Shepherd, Shelter Ghost, Destroy Evil, The Witch's Vanity, and then the Tishana's Tidebinder. So Witch's Vanity is kind of the outlier here. That's something that we want to take a look at. And then Selesnya Aggro, we've seen this a bit. Malira in here, Seraphic Steed? I don't know. Inability to read is what that is. The Inability to Read Steed. That's what we're calling that one. Llanowar Elves, Tulsimer Midnight Light. So this is a new one. 2 colorless, 1 green, 2 white. Legendary creature, Elf Scout. It's a 3/2 with lifelink. And when Tulsimir Midnight enters the battlefield, create Voja Fenstalker, or Voja Fenstalker, a legendary 5/5 green and white wolf creature token with trample. Whenever a wolf you control attacks, if Tulsamir attack this turn, target creature in opponent control blocks that wolf this combat if able. Interesting. And then Trostani Tree Whispers, again, an interesting one. A green, and then a white or green, and then a white, a 4/4. And you can pay a colorless and a green. Target creature gains death touch until end of turn. You can pay a green or a white, and target creature gains vigilance until end of turn. And you can play 2 colorless, 1 white. Target creature gains double strike until end of turn. Nice little combo piece. Really kind of makes your stuff a little bit more interesting. So this is not the Selesnya like tokens counters deck that we've seen. This is a very different approach. Took 3rd place. This one is an instant or sorcery card would be put into a graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. Wily Duke is a 1 colorless, 1 green, 1 white. It's vigilance, and whenever it attacks or becomes tapped, actually just whenever it becomes tapped, you gain 1 life and draw a card. Now this one's fun. The Wilt Leaf Liege. We are seeing this in that more Selesnya tokens counters deck that we've seen, because of the Esper Pixie deck. So if they make you pitch it, all of a sudden you have a 4/4 on the board that gives other green creatures +1/+1, other white creatures +1/+1. So if you have creatures that are green and white, I think it works for both sides of that. So pretty sweet little card. Unidentified hover ship for some removal, split up, shelter by ghosts, and then in the sideboard we have that invasion of Gobakon, Aven Interrupter, rest in peace for that graveyard hate, Elspeth Smite, a cease and desist, which is exile up to 2 target cards from a single graveyard. Target player gains 2 life and draws a card. Destroy all artifacts and enchantments. Nice little target card for, again, that graveyard hate. Surge of Salvation, prevent all damage with black or red, Vivian, and then Anissa. So really interesting Selesnya aggro deck. I haven't seen that one before. Demir Midrange. Again, pretty standard package, nothing crazy to see here. In this one, just solid result, 2nd place. And then we have Azorius Tempo. This is where we're bringing in all that graveyard hate is for this deck here. It's all about pitching a lot of instances and sorceries to make that Haughty Jin nice and big. A bunch of ways to get Aberrant Oculus into the graveyard, and then you're pulling them out with things like Helping Hand and Recommission. Is some good ways to get a hold of that. Awesome. So that finishes out the standard challenge. Next up is this European Magic Series RCQ. 56 players, so it's a decent sized tournament. We'll take a look at the top 4 for this one. Pretty standard Zur Overlords deck that we have here. Zur running 3 of, which I always think is interesting when I see a Zur deck running 3 of. I know it's a legendary creature, but you really kind of want to like optimize your access to it. But these cards are powerful on their own, so like I kind of understand at the same time. Because Mistmoors is really powerful, Hauntwoods is really powerful. You're controlling the board with your instances and sorceries. Enchantments are giving you a lot of value. Over in the sideboard, you're running an Atraxa, Authority of the Councils, Elspeth, Get Lost, Ghost Vacuum, Nissa, Outrageous Robbery, which is always hilarious, especially if you have a ton of mana. Realmbreaker, Rest in Peace, Season of the Burrow, Split Up, and another Sunfall. So really solid approach to Domain Zur. We have another Gruul aggro deck, pretty standard, running 1 Paw Patch Recruit. We're seeing a little bit more removal in the instance category here, Obliterating Bolt, 2 Innkeeper's Talent. Over in the sideboard, we got the Lithomatic Barrage, Paw Patch, Pyroclasm, Questing Druid, Screaming Nemesis, Sunspire Lynx, and the Torch the Tower. And then in 2nd place, we're seeing more Esper Pixie. Seeing if anything crazy here. So they're not running the Mockingbird here, but they are running Entity Tracker for extra card draw, which I think has been a really good engine for this deck because it's whenever you play an enchantment. So I really don't mind the addition of that or that being a static card in the build. Then over here in the sideboard, Destroy Evils, some Rest in Peace, No More Lies, Shelter by Ghost, Shrouded Shepherd, The Witch's Vanity again, and Sunblessed Healer. And then that leads us to the Azorius Omniscience. So we saw this before. We actually saved a tab because we want to review this deck. Don't quite know the win con for this deck, but this deck seems to have a lot going on. So if this is something that interests you, I believe it's trying to cheat Omniscience out in some way. and just get a lot of value that way. But outside of that, this is a deck that we're going to have to study. This is a deck that we're going to spend some time reviewing to really understand what it does, but it has won a couple tournaments. So we saw it took first at this MTGO standard event, and it took first in this European event as well. So really kind of look out for that Azorius Omniscience deck. It's kind of a little sleeper deck that we've ran into a couple times now. All right, now we're getting into the last two. The Champions Cup Store qualifier in Japan. We're only going to look at the top two. It's a smaller tournament. The first one up is the Gruul. Again, not seeing anything crazy. We are running 3 Questing Druids, and then the Innkeeper's Talent is really the only green that they're leveraging. The rest of the green is going to be over in the sideboard. Another Questing Druid, a Paw Patch Formation, and then we're just running a bunch of red. Obliterating Bolt, Urabasks, Lithomantic Barrage, Torch the Tower, and Scorching Shot. And then what took it? The good old Dimir. And what do we have here? So we're running a lot of one-ofs in this Dimir. So the Mockingbird, a Tishana, a Sheoldred, as some examples, but then we're running the pretty standard package of Fairy Mastermind, Spyglass, Enduring Curiosity, and the Flood Pits. I like the Mockingbird because it can make a copy of the Preacher, of some of the other cards that are really bringing some value here. A lot of removal in the instant categories, Nowhere to Run in the enchantment, and of course Kaito. Over in the sideboard, a lot of one-ofs again: Negate, Duress, Disfigure, Cut Down, Sheoldred. Then we have a Defabricate. Choose one. Counter target artifact or enchantment spell. If a spell is countered this way, exile it instead of putting it into the owner's graveyard. Counter target activated or triggered ability. Interesting. Gix's Command, another Anoint, the Filigree Silex. We're seeing more and more of that. The Blot Out, some more Tishanas, and a Dissection Tool. So Dissection Tool being in the sideboard is kind of interesting. But that was that Japanese tournament. And then the final one for us in Japan, we're going to take a look at, I don't know why they did first, second here, but I guess we'll take a look at the top 4 just to see what we have. So we have the Azorius. It looks like the Azorius Convoke deck that we've seen. I really like Dusk Rose Reliquary? Dusk Rose Reliquary. So at a Glyph, Dollmaker's Shop is an interesting add to this. Haven't seen a lot of Dollmaker's Shop into this deck, but it's a fun little go-wide deck. Get a lot of cards down really quickly. And then Negate, Rest in Peace, Destroy Evil, Protect Negotiator, and Elspeth Smite, Invasion of Gobakan, and Tishana's Tidebinder over in the side. Another Gruul aggro. Again, nothing crazy. Monastery Swift Spear down to 2. Questing Druid up to 3, and I think it's so they could run a little bit more removal. 4 Burst, 4 Monstrous, 3 Torch the Tower, and then 2 Innkeepers. Over in the sideboard, Lithomatic Barrage, Obliterating Bolt, Paw Patch Formation, Questing Druid again, Scorching, Torch the Tower, and Urabasks. And then we got another Gruul aggro taking, it looks like, 2nd place. That's what we're going to call it. Again, fudge some of the numbers, went down to 2 in Swift Spear, up to 3 in Questing Druid, and then a little bit more removal. This is almost the same exact list as the other one. And then the Boros Burn, taking a tournament. Interesting. Monastery Swift Spear, Slick Shot, Emberheart, Hired Claw, Screaming Nemesis, and your creature package. Over here in your instance, we got the Boros Charm, Burst Lightning, Lightning Helix in Monstrous Rage. Then we have a Bolt Wave. And then over in the sideboard, Knight of Grace, Slagstorm for that wide removal, Rest in Peace, Lightning Helix, Sword of Once and Future. I think this thing is crazy. Equipped creature has protection from blue and from black. So once it's equipped, doing some nasty stuff. More card draw with Case of the Crimson Pulse, and of course, 3 Sheltered by Ghosts. Whew! I told you, friends, that this one would be a long one because we had so many tournaments going off. We had SCG Atlanta, which had like a third of the tournaments that we saw, but we even saw some new decks, a little bit of new tech along the way. And then my favorite is this new Azorius Omniscience deck. I'm actually going to have to go research this deck and see how it wins. This is not the time or place to spend an hour reviewing a specific deck and figuring it out. So we not only found a little bit of new tech, especially in the Gruul aggro. We saw that take the SCG Con in Atlanta, a Gruul aggro running Leyline of the Residents, and then Overprotects. And so we're seeing a little bit addition to the Gruul aggro deck to add some value. And then we saw some new decks along the way. Of course, we saw a lot of Esper Pixie. We saw a lot of Dimir doing really well. You know what's something we didn't see a lot of? Golgari. There's been a big fall off in Golgari, but increase in Selesnya, increase in Azorius, increase in Dimir, increase in Gruul. We're even seeing some mono red. We saw Boros Burn win a tournament. And so overall, you have a lot of options this week for taking a look at what you might play in your local tournaments, hopefully your RCQ, so that you can get your regional championship qualifier. And I can see you at the next regional championships. I still need to get my standard RCQ invite. I got my 2 modern ones, but I got to get my my standard ones as well. So that's something I'll be working on personally. And I know I'm kind of working on Gruul aggro. That's the sort of what I've bought into at this point. I'm really, really interested in Dimir, but I think the skill cap might be a little bit beyond me at this time. And then I'm just keeping an eye on the other stuff and what's really interesting and what's going on. But Gruul aggro is performing really well, and it's something that I think I'm going to be continuing to personally play. Also, the Boros Mice is something I personally play. So let me know in the comments below, what are you planning on playing? What are some of the decks that surprised you? Some of the new tech that surprised you? And of course, if you got this far in the video, you might as well do the thing. Like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. And until next time, we'll catch y'all at the table.